are these tools going to be driven how technology has always been driven through the enterprise, sort of top down, or potentially because the technology adoption curve leaving out of enterprise for a minute, just thinking in general, maybe 20 years ago it was DoD, then the enterprise, then consumers. And maybe today it's consumers, then the enterprise, then the CIA. Does that change the fact that maybe now bottom up is the way enterprise 2.0 needs to happen? And I think I think that is the big question for enterprise 2.0 in the next year, in my opinion.
What we're seeing both. I mean, like the case study that I would use for us was Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble for us started off with just a small kind of innovation team that was kind of kicking the tires, trying to figure out how we take collaboration in Enterprise 2.0 and bring it into kind of a large organization like Procter & Gamble. Within a few months had gone from a couple hundred users to almost 20,000 users. And a year later, the CEO is saying, look, the way we want to communicate to the organization now is these types of tools. We want to use a blog as the primary communication vehicle because I understand now that I create this historical record of information that as people come in and out of the organization, they can tap into that richness of history, and they can learn more about the organization's history, the people, the way we interact, and along the way we figured out things that it makes it very easy to allow these highly distributed teams to interact and share information very easily with one another, which is I think one of the points that you brought up. But I think more and more we're seeing kind of both sides. I think 3 years ago was much more kind of grassroots, people kicking the tires, but we are seeing kind of a lot of the top down now of a lot of the executives saying, we get it. How do we bring this kind of culture shift into our organization? And some organizations still aren't ready for it. I mean, I talked with a large, very large Fortune 50 company yesterday. Talked to their innovation department, and they flat out said, we're just not ready for this yet. We can't do it. Our culture is not about sharing. Our culture is very much about keeping information ourselves, and I just don't know how we could even get this kick-started on an organization. So it's...
Yeah. It probably depends a lot on who's at the top and who's at the bottom, whether it's going to be top down or bottom up.
Well, and your influencers are along the way.
Yeah.
Who has the influence to the person ultimately at the top? And then the other part is, what about the people that move in and out of the organization and the portability of that information? I come into a P&G and I have access to all of this blog and all of this great information, and it gives me a good sense of that. But in that IBM, how many people are on IBM? But how many people on LinkedIn that work at IBM are connected to other people that they work with at IBM? They're not all automatically connected, and they're not all automatically part of the same network. They're members of LinkedIn in their own silo. Right?
I guess the question
so
comes up,
as they slide in and out of the organization.
What do you do with transient employees?
It's, from a LinkedIn perspective, it's their profile.
Yeah.
So I come in, and so when I started LinkedIn 2.5 years ago, I updated my LinkedIn profile to say I now work at LinkedIn.com. I leave LinkedIn and I go to Telligent. I say I now work at Telligent. My network.
But those relationships never change, right?
Right.
You still have the relationships.
Right. So my relationships, the 700 or so connections that I have, come with me.
Well, but except for the group part of that, I think makes it tricky, right? Because like you join the IBM group or the LinkedIn group, you get access to everybody else in that group.
Right. And that's the closed community piece of, we have a whole bunch of them, but I know I'm in 2 closed groups. One is a LinkedIn employee group that's just for LinkedIn employees, that's policed by HR. And then we have a sales group that's policed by, we have an owner on the sales team. That I happened to notice one day, I was looking at somebody's former employee's profile, I'm like, hey, this guy's still in this group. Maybe we might want to do something about that.
There's a community policing each other, right?
That's actually one of the #1 topics that we've had to deal with recently with organizations is how do we deal with people as they depart the organization? How do we unwind their identity?
Right.
Do we have some organizations that say, look, we're just going to, the person kind of cease to exist. And we're like, no. People are strongly associating the information with the individual. And then we have some people who are saying, look, we'll take all the information and assign it to anonymous. Right. Which doesn't work either, but it's a very interesting problem that I think a lot of companies are struggling with today.
In my perspective, of, for lack of a better term, an internal Facebook within a corporation, that when, in terms of top down, so many things, virtually everything comes from top down, that and perception is reality, so it's being imposed upon you. So and my fun thing in law is to focus on the practical aspects of, one, you may have to convince or educate and allow them to convince the top that this is a good thing. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of this, we all know about that. But then if you simply impose it from the top down, you run the risk that that's the same as they told me what the health care plan I should have and this and this. What I found is a pretty good mechanism, read manipulation, would be to announce this wonderful pilot project that we think has a lot of potential to it, but we're only going to put it, and it's only going to be available to this facility or this group of people on a global or nationwide basis, and then tell some stories, have some people talk about this, and then you have everybody else going, how come I don't have it? And I want it too. Yeah. I want it too, and then you've sort of manipulated a ground up a trust and credibility, and it's really worked pretty well. Not that lawyers do stuff like that.
No.
But me too, right? I want it too.
Yeah,
Why'd you have an iPhone? Well, my friend got one. I want an iPhone. Right. At first, it wasn't about what the capabilities were. It was really cool, and your friend had one. And it's like, oh, that's the latest gadget I want. That's my wife always says. You just want the latest gadget, pretty much. Yeah. I don't know if it works.
I'm guilty as charged.
I want one. Right. It's a shiny object. Right. And so, but you do have that, and we obviously that's how LinkedIn grew, right? And that's how Facebook grew. Is somebody created this thing. And they invited somebody.
The right community. And
they invited somebody, and it's dating myself, going back to Joe Namath in the Breck commercial, right? He told two friends, and she told two friends, and then you got a screen full of people, right? But that's how those things happen, and that's how adoption can happen absolutely inside an organization.
Well, listen, we're running on towards the end here. Are there any final questions from anybody out there in the audience? Well, please join me. These guys have been great sports over the past couple of weeks getting this panel together. And I really appreciate them coming and having an open conversation about issues around social media data. So let's